Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good here. And I want to follow up and say I got a lot of positive feedback from the Mardi Gras show. Okay, even though it was a little bit staggered, which was back on the 13th of February. And as I explained in that, even though traditionally you think of February of the 13th as Friday the 13th, much among Hispanics, it's Tuesday the 13th. But anyway, I did that whole show around, besides the Mardi Gras thing, about the superstition of the number 13. And a lot of people were surprised. Like, there was one part where I stated where Lloyd's of London, which is a very famous and well-known, well-established insurance company, would not insure a ship that either was leaving, either on the 13th or much less the Friday the 13th. Okay. And so everybody thinks, it's people are superstitious and they believe all this weird stuff. And let me tell you, some of the most superstitious people are stuff having to do with nautical stuff. You'd be surprised. I was like, they believe this? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that is attached to, even in modern times. How's this? Even in modern times. So anyway, besides that, everything is great. I am going to, even though we're still a few months out, I am going to do the Halloween one. And the reason why I say is, let's face it, the rate we're going, time flies when you're having fun. And I'm having fun. So pretty soon we'll be there. And I know people have asked me, because I haven't mentioned it that often, how are my chickens doing? All my chickens are doing fine. And I have my guineas, which are now laying eggs for me. And yeah, they're all fine. I haven't had anybody, as a matter of fact, well, no, I take that back. Yesterday, I lost one of my very oldest hens. She was like 6 or 7 years old. She was like a bantam naked neck cross. And I was a little bit upset. But then I thought, you know what? She lived a long life for a chicken, like 6 or 7 years. And I bought her. And she just died because she was chicken life. She was an old hen. So yeah, that kind of stuff. But otherwise, everything is good. Still been cold up here in North Florida. Everybody asks, no snow, but it dips down into like 40, 39 degrees at night. So, as a matter of fact, when I finish the show, that's what I got to do. I got to run outside, and I've got a big coop, and I got to close it up and stuff like that, and make sure everybody gets along good, because these guineas, and it's like, I'm telling you, chicken kingdom, it's savage. So yeah, I got to take care of them. But let's get on to the good part. The good part is, who's the guest tonight here at Stories of the Supernatural. This is the first time this gentleman has been here. His name is Maxim W. Furek. He has a very eclectic background, which includes aspects of psychology, addictions, and rock journalism. He has a master's degree in communications from Bloomsburg University and a bachelor degree in psychology from Aquinas College. He is an avid researcher of contemporary drug trends and psychosocial aspects of the drug culture. He has written numerous articles for both addictions and rock publications. His books include The Jordan Brothers, Rock's Fortunate Sons, The Death Proclamation of Generation X, A Self-Fulfilling Prophesy of Goth, Grunge and Heroin, which traces the origins of the current opiate epidemic, and Sheppton, The Myth, Miracle, and Music. His column Cultural Trends appeared in Counselor, the magazine for addiction and behavioral health professionals. His most recent book releases Flying Saucer Esoteric, The Altered States of Ufology. This was released in September of 2023. And before that, Coleridge and Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. That was released in March of 2023. So help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Max?
Hi, Marlene. Great to hear your voice, and thanks so much for the invite. Yeah, I was looking forward to. I was looking forward to having a conversation with you. So, I'm over here in Citrus County, Florida.
Oh, okay.
A place called Hernando. So
yes.
I spend summers in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and then and that's Bigfoot country. And
yes.
then I spend the winters down here in the Sunshine State. So so this is great. Thanks so much for having me.
Let me tell you something. I know it gets cold, and I tell everybody, but I don't think I would do well with snow if I had to shovel snow. And I'm a Floridian. I'm a native Floridian. And it's like, I could take the cold. And even then I'm like, I tell everybody I'm a weather wimp, but that snow thing, I look at these people walking through these snow drifts and I'd be like, oh, so.
Yeah, I spent quite a few winters back home, with that. So it's better down here.
Yes.
It's better down here. Sometimes it's cold in the morning, but it warms up fast.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I'm liking Florida.
Yeah, of course. And people, how long have you been coming down here? For a while, or was it recent?
This will be our seventh season.
So, you've been here a long time then. Okay.
Yeah. We bought a place in 2017, and we became Florida residents last year. So
okay.
we're street legal. We're legit.
Yeah. You know what some people have, believe it or not? Some people, especially from up north, sometimes have a problem with the summers here because they can't handle the hot, humid, even especially if you're like south of West Palm. Yeah.
Absolutely. When we were here in, I think it was June, and we have a community pool where I live, and it was 94 degrees in the water. 94 degrees.
Yay.
So, yeah, I know. But we had fun. So
I know. Let me
Does
tell you
get
something.
warm
I can't complain, but you know what? When I'm steaming in the hot, and I mean, I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in Miami, so I know what hot and humid is. But when it's the summer, I'm like bitching and complaining, like, oh my God, it's so hot. What? I can't wait till it's winter, and now I'm doing the same thing. Oh my God, it's so cold. So yeah, I'm that kind of person. But bottom line, I like the heat better. But anyway, Max, I was fascinated. Obviously, you've done a wide variety of coverage. Okay, what's this question? Did you decide to progress from the journalism and having to do with rock groups or music into the paranormal and ufology, or did you have an experience? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I stumbled into it, really. Back home in northeastern Pennsylvania, there was a song called Timothy, 1971.
I know that song.
That was written by Rupert Holmes, the Pina Colada Man.
Really? You're kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah. And Rupert was trying to get this group called the Boys, Buoys, trying to get them some notoriety. So he wrote a song about cannibalism in a mine. And I was working on a rock mythology, and I was trying to connect the song Timothy from 71 with the 1963 Sheppton mine disaster where, and this is a true story, 3 guys were entombed for 2 weeks and only 2 came out, and there were allegations of cannibalism.
So let me ask you something, then that song was based on fact?
Yeah, exactly. Even though Rupert dances around it, and even though he says that it wasn't, and even though he says that he didn't know about Sheppton, but then during the 50-year anniversary of Sheppton, he said, just maybe I had heard something and it crept into my subconscious.
Okay, all right. Sure. That's
what I said. So anyway, as I'm researching the Sheppton, what I call the Sheppton mythology, I found these really bizarre things, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and afterlife experiences. This is the Sheppton mine disaster of 1963. The miners saw the vision of Pope John the 23rd. They saw him in the mine. He stayed there with them. He gave them a sign of peace that they were going to be rescued.
That's unusual. That's very unusual. You know that, right? Of all the people.
Well, what's real unusual is that Pope John the 23rd died in June, and that was before Sheppton. Sheppton was in August, so this was a purported act of life after death.
Yes.
And when Pope John the 23rd was canonized in 2014, Vatican academics said that, yes, Sheppton was one of his miracles. So this Sheppton thing just got bigger and bigger. And so I put out a book called Sheppton, The Myth, Miracle, and Music. That was the last day of 2015. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, that just blew up, and I get invited on all these podcasts and paranormal conferences. And, I mean, it just opened the door. And, again, it was a fluke. I never went looking for the paranormal.
Let me ask you, in the Sheppton incident, how many men were trapped in that mining?
There were three men trapped for 2 weeks, and only two came out.
So, in other words, okay, that. You know what? And I'm going to interject this real quick for anybody that's not familiar, that's a little bit older, not familiar with that song. When you listen to it, you got to listen to it a couple of times before you start realizing, wait a minute, are they talking about they ate him?
Yeah.
It's a really nice tune, and then you start really listening to the lyrics, and you're like, huh? But yeah.
I know. And that was the Yuck Factor, and that was sort of that controversy. That Yuck Factor propelled the song to number 17 on Billboard. So anyway, I'm researching Sheppton. I find all these weird paranormal things, and that opened up the gates, the doors to the paranormal universe. And I've been accepted, and I just can't tell you how wonderful it is. And I'm a rock journalist. I write about rock and roll, and I write about drugs, and I have a real passion for rock and roll, as I have a passion for recreational drugs. Now, let me clarify this. As an academic, I like to talk about bath salts and synthetic cannabinoids and ketamine, the derivative of PCP, phencyclidine, angel dust, and all the other stuff. And I worked for a while for the Pennsylvania Department of Health, doing anti-drug lectures, and writing anti-drug articles. So, but it's the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I love the rock, and I love the drugs, again, as an academic, as, to study them, not to do them.
No,
and,
right. And let's face it, that is part and parcel of the rock and roll lifestyle, if you want to call it that. I don't know. But yeah. And the thing about drugs, I don't do drugs. I have in my younger days, but I'll tell you what, with some of the hallucinogens that are floating around, that try to mimic ecstasy, MDMA, a lot of these things, they promote themselves as being a drug that's going to go and make music and sex and life better. But typically what happens is you get so overamped and, that you become psychotic. So, the stuff, I just warn people, just, buyer beware. You don't know where this stuff is. There's just no quality control where maybe there were back in the day, but there's not now. So, the sources. And let me ask you, since you were involved in that field, Max, did you ever come across anything, what they call that 27 Club, which was all these musicians that died at that age?
Yeah, I've done extensive writing about the 27 Club. And as a matter of fact, when I was writing for Counselor, the magazine for addiction and behavioral health professionals, I coined the term celebrity blood voyeurism. Society's fascination for people like Amy Winehouse and Janis Joplin and Kurt Cobain, all of them, by the way, being 27, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix. And I'm writing a book, another project called Celebrity Blood Voyeurism, and I have a chapter on the 27 Club, and it's extensive. It's just too bad that these people died at that age. Robert Johnson, the Crossroads guy, the blues guitar player.
Yes.
He was 27 when he was poisoned by his girlfriend's lover, his girlfriend's husband. But that 27.
Right, because some of them did die from drugs. It's like, okay, but then other stuff happened to them, like you said, like that they were like killed or just weird stuff would happen to them at that age.
Yeah. There was one guy that I think got electrocuted. There was a whole bunch of stuff, So it's just pretty amazing. But then again, there's people that have died at age 26 and 25 and 28 and 29. So it's just a number, but it's just amazing the amount of celebrity, superstars. And back in the 60s, Joplin, Morrison, and Hendrix. I mean, all three, 27, and boom, boom, boom. They went 1, 2, 3, and Morrison, who is from Melbourne, Florida,
Yes.
Morrison said that he's number 3. So he was sort of bragging
Well, you know
about
what?
that.
It's almost like that thing, like that people when they die at the, how's this? Like before you get old, like at the height of your fame, like the price of fame kind of deal. It's like this is like a bargain kind of thing. You become famous, and at the height, you die youthful because let's face it, you're 27.
Oh, right, yeah, okay. Like Neil Young said, yeah, you flame out,
Right.
and
Yes.
and you don't rust out. So somebody like James Dean, that was only had 3 motion pictures, but
Yes.
he was this good-looking young kid. He mumbled his words, and he sort of like offered us the template. Some of the guys of the 50s.
Yes.
That you could mumble and just be this like sort of like smoldering guy. You in the background. You weren't front and center, but you're sort of in the back. But when he died, everybody remembered his youth because he was young.
Right.
When
There's
he died
no pictures of him like all these other actors or celebrities that grow old eventually. They're forever young because that's all there is. Because when they died,
and that's what it was. Yeah. And when you look at Elvis, who was really good looking and sensual, as a young man, and then he became bloated and obese.
Oh,
and,
God, yes.
And self-destructive. It was just sad how Elvis went out. Just like eating like a pig, and and it's too bad. But
right. And then
anyway,
you hear about, and I don't know how much that that he was fixated that his mom had died when she was relatively young in the sense of the 40s. And you wonder how much of this is, besides actual lifestyle choices, is like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of deal. So, and even now, look at his daughter. She passed away also young, which is a shame. But
Yep. Same with Whitney Houston and her daughter.
Yes, my God, that's right.
Yeah. I have. There was a guy named Nicholas Adamczak. Nick Adams was his name, and he was a pretty big thing in the 60s. He had a program called The Rebel, and he was this Confederate soldier that walked around and had these adventures. He was trying to avenge his father's death, but he kept a journal.
Okay.
And Nick Adams was one of the guys that was in Rebel Without a Cause, which they called a cursed film because people like Nick Adams, James Dean, Sal Mineo, Natalie Wood, they all died mysterious deaths. They were all in that motion picture. But anyway, Nick Adams is buried in Berwick, Pennsylvania. That's my hometown.
Okay.
And I have pictures. I was neighbors with his mother, Catherine Adamczak, and I have pictures of Nick Adams and his mother there in Graceland with Elvis and Elvis's mom.
Wow.
And Nick was hanging out there, and I got these black and white shots. I mean, they're like vintage. I don't know if they've ever been published anyplace, but Nick Adams and James Dean, when James Dean died in that car crash, I think the last motion picture that he had was Giant, and he mumbled some of his lines. So they had Nick Adams redo those lines because Nick Adams was really good at imitating voices. So Nick Adams was in the movie Giant, and just an interesting thing. But Nick Adams and James Dean, they lived together for a while. They were pals. When Elvis came to L.A., Elvis was a shy kid. He was just a shy little kid from Mississippi, and they took him around and yeah, really, and took him around and introduced him to people and introduced him to Natalie Wood and all this other stuff. So
let me ask you, didn't Nick Adams, maybe I'm misremembering, didn't he die under weird circumstances? Like something?
Yeah, he did. He died in Los Angeles. He died of formaldehyde poisoning.
Okay.
And I have 3 chapters on Nick Adams in my book, Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. And anyway, Nick Adams died of formaldehyde poisoning. His daughter, Allison, thinks that he was killed by his attorney. This hasn't been proved, but he died of formaldehyde poisoning, and it looked like he was locked inside the house. It didn't look like anybody actually busted into the house. So it was a mysterious a mysterious death, but it was called accidental formaldehyde intoxication. I think under suspicious causes.
Right, one of those things where they didn't say it was suicide, but they didn't say it was a crime, and I'm sure the police didn't do anything with it, and that was that.
Yeah, I don't think it was. I don't think it was a suicide. I think that.
Oh no, but but yeah, again, he was a young guy. Since they're in that same age group as obviously the thing that happened with James Dean. It was a car wreck, so it's like okay, but. It's incredible. Again, it's almost like, if you want to get a little bit into the spooky stuff, it's like that bargain that you make. You're gonna become very famous, and unfortunately, even at the height of your fame, you have so much promise of what's yet to happen for you, but that's it.
That's it. I'll tell you what. Steven Tyler of Aerosmith said that fame is like 100 chickens just pecking at you, and it's one thing. To do something to hit it out of the park, but then try to do that again. Most people don't, whether they're rock singers or authors or actors or what. It's really tough to follow up on a standard, a barometer, some accomplishment, some wonderful accomplishment.
It's almost like you become your own worst enemy. Like, what's that?
Exactly, yeah.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Everybody was waiting for the next...
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good
it never happened.
It never. And I read the book, and it was okay, but it wasn't like her first book just resonated. Like she captured something. So
right. And even though I've heard, and I don't know that the one that really did pen To Kill a Mockingbird was Truman Capote, but again, who cares? Because everybody was expecting, okay, well, what are you going to do now? After you wrote this book that was made into a movie that blah, 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 and then it just kind of like stopped right there.
I've been fortunate as an author because my books have been doing really well. And, so my philosophy, I guess, is just to have as many balls in the air as you can, because the more things you have going for you, the more you give the universe a chance to go and recognize them and embrace them and run with them and make things happen. So it's almost like it's some kind of synergy, some kind of
Sure. I think a lot of people talk themselves out of doing things because they go down that road of, oh, nothing's going to happen, nobody's going to notice. Let's say let's talk on the creative side, whatever, and they just never get to the point of, let me try it, like you said, let me see how many things I can do. But absolutely, if you don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. So
people are held back by fear, fear of failure and all this. And I, just love doing what I'm doing. I love doing the book signings. I like having the book launches. And, I have a little small following that people come around, and it's just nice. It's not,
absolutely.
It's not, it's not, blown up my ego or anything like that, but it's just a nice thing when people come up and say, like, for example, with Sheppton, this one woman came up to me at a program and said, I read your book 3 times. And I said, why? And she goes, I just liked it so much, and that's just pretty amazing.
Oh,
but
yes. That's a good feeling.
That endorsement is worth, like $100,000. It's priceless. So, yes. I've been, so anyway, I've been.
Let me ask you something real quick, Max, since you've been in both areas. Have you found, like, especially when you were doing the rock and roll and, some of the drug stuff, do you think that sometimes the drug use and the lifestyle, whatever, that sometimes it opens a doorway sometimes to darker things to happen or to come into the lifestyle, whether it attracts certain people into the circle, or just, in other words, it kind of like, it just opens a doorway because of the activity that's going on? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Pope Francis talks about evil being something that keeps you away from God, keeps you further away from God. And that could be sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That could be a whole lot of things. That could be, the wrong influences. Mm-hmm. So, there's, I like to talk the God talk and I think, I don't want to get into this thing, but it's more than just Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior. There's a lot of, I believe in higher powers, and we get to pick and choose who our higher power is, and And I think people, especially Christians, need to be respectful of that, because it's not just one religion.
No. And by this, I'm talking about, and like I said, this has really nothing to do with religion or even denomination. I'm talking about where, when people, let's say that's their lifestyle. Let's say they're doing crazy stuff with crazy people. It's kind of risky, but then sometimes I think the evil, if you want, let's call it that, the evil with a capital E, it's almost the thing that whispers in your ear that pushes you to do that one thing that takes you in a direction, either by one act or just leads you down the road. I'm not talking exorcist stuff, like, stuff flying around. I'm talking about choices that are made that end up being really, really bad.
Yeah. Specifically, I warn people about fortune tellers, seances, tarot cards, Ouija boards, and all that. I think those could be portals to someplace that's dark and foreboding. So, those things scare me, so I stay away from that. But it could be, you want to associate yourself with people that are positive, people that share your values, people that have your back, people that love your light.
Yes.
All of that positivity. I mean, that's what's going to get you through, the darkness. And, I get up in the morning, I do my stretches, and I meditate, and that's how I start my day. And with the meditation, throughout the day, when the demons start to come, again, all of your listeners are Homo sapiens. We're all human beings. We all suffer from the same darkness, the same mental illness, the same neuroses. And for me, meditation is just a wonderful thing, because throughout the day, if the demons start coming after me, I just get into that little pocket where I meditate, where I feel safe and loved, and I get back there, and that's the best we have as human beings. I mean, that's the best that we can do, to just go and control our thoughts and our mind, because bad things happen, and bad things will happen, and things will happen to us that we don't deserve. Bad things. But
exactly. That's the most difficult one to comprehend.
I know. Yeah. Why do bad things happen to good people? Bad things happen to bad people too. So,
you know what? How's this? I think that sometimes when people, let's say, if you're involved in a risky lifestyle and something bad happens, it's like, okay, you had some part in that. But I think when people, like you said, when you're like, I'm living a good life, or I'm being a moral person, or I'm a nice person, or whatever, and then bad things happen, people are like, this is not supposed to happen to me because I'm a nice person, or I do the right thing, or hey, I don't go out to the bad part of town in the middle of the night, so maybe why did I get mugged, or whatever. And I think that's where sometimes people have a problem with that deduction.
Yeah, I think during my younger days, I think I was on a path of self-destruction. I wanted to taste it all. I wanted to get all those yas and experience everything. And it was like a life of excess, of a hedonist.
Okay.
And and again, that's, my story isn't unique. A lot of my buddies, a lot of my friends, we talk about the same thing. It's good that we stopped. It's good that we pulled out of that. It's good that we met somebody to give us stability, all that. So, but again, some of that comes with maturity and age, and, not everybody gets the message. There's some people that crash and burn, and, so.
Well, I think at some point the self-preservation part kicks in, where your subconscious mind tells you, you keep on doing this, you're going to end up pushing up daisies,
Yeah.
So at some point, either, like you said, maturity, or, the reality of it starts, your subconscious starts tapping you on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And
it could be, it could also be deemed a miracle. I've talked to so many people. I used to I was an addictions counselor, and I used to talk to these people in recovery, like, how did you get into recovery? Heroin addicts, people that were, really at the bottom.
Right.
How did you get into recovery? And so many people have told me that they don't know. He goes, I don't know how it happened, but it was a miracle. It was a miracle that I stopped. Or somebody who had a problem and was invited to go to an AA meeting and said, okay, what the heck, I'll go. And that became the first day of the rest of their lives where they got into recovery. But, for a lot of us that are doing these maladaptive things, like when we have issues, you could do adaptive things that are positive and they have good results, or you could do maladaptive things like drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping, eating, whatever, that are harmful, and so you have those choices. So I think a lot of people, the easy way out is just to do the drugs and cover over the misery.
Let me ask you, do you think that a lot of this behavior, though, in some cases is traced back to childhood trauma, whether it was emotional or physical, and they never went to therapy for it, or it was never addressed? Yeah, that's how they cope with it?
That's a good point, because, when with trauma, it doesn't go away. It's like it's in your fiber, and you could either put it in a lockbox and put it over on the side and repress it, but it usually comes out some way.
Yes.
And one of the best things is talk therapy, where you talk to a counselor or a priest or a rabbi, and you make sense of it, and you give it parameters. So this trauma that you're dealing with, this bad thing that happened to you as a child, it happened. It's part of your resume, but you're safe now, and you didn't cause that, and you could just put it over there on the side where it has a beginning and end, and it's contained, and it doesn't have to go and eat you away, because you're not trying to repress. You're not using all these energies to repress it and hide it and say it didn't really happen. Well, it did happen, and that's unfortunate. But I know women who have been sexually abused, and 40 years later they're still dealing with that trauma.
Right, like they live under the shadow of that event, even if now they're adults, and maybe it was happened, like you said, 40 years before, and it still casts a shadow over their lives. Yep.
Yeah. And for those of us who don't have to deal with that, thank God. What a blessing. Imagine what it would be like to go through life, having been, say molested by a loved one, by a parent.
Right.
Those people that are there to love and protect you.
But that's a very deep betrayal.
Instead they abuse you. They.
Oh no, absolutely. I want to say that's like a double betrayal, besides whatever happened, whether it was physical, sexual abuse, molestation, plus at the hands of a caregiver. That's like a double betrayal, because, like you said, this is the person that's supposed to be protecting you, and instead, they're the perpetrator. So I think that sometimes that behavior where you see these people with the drug problems and the addiction, and it's like they're trying to, I guess, cope with something that happened, and they just
they're trying. Usually they're trying to either run away from something or run towards something. Run away from the pain or run towards a better life. But the drugs don't help. All they do is they just they just give you a little bit of downtime. They put you in a twilight zone for a while, and then you wake up and the problem is exacerbated. It's still there, and it's maybe even bigger. So
what is that saying? Everywhere you go, there you are. It's like you said.
Very good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let me ask you, when, and this is, I know, is a little bit on the unusual side, but since you worked with addicts or people in recovery, do you think that some people that kept trying to go be sober, in other words, they just couldn't? Do you think there was such a thing as what they call spirit attachment, where any of them were being influenced by negative spiritual attachments? That's why they, in other words, logically, they wanted to not do the drugs, whatever it was, whether it was alcohol, whatever, or they understood, I'm going to die, or maybe it's ruined my life, whatever, but they just couldn't stay without doing what they were doing, the behavior. Do you think that there was some type of spiritual turbulence or anything that was interfering?
Yeah, you could call it that, and you're probably right. But also, the more you do the drug, the more you have these toxins in your system, the more it's going to go and impact on your cognition. It's going to be more emotive and cognitive. You're going to make wrong decisions, and there's this cycle. You're stressed out, and so the only thing is doing a drug to get relief, or your drug, whatever that is. Sex,
right,
food, whatever. You go to that thing that relieves it. And what needs to happen is There has to be something else. Like,
Okay.
you get stressed out, so you need to have a timeout where you could go and call somebody, pray, go to a meeting, whatever, do anything it takes to not do that drug, not do that line, not shoot up again. So that's what is, and because drug addicts act like animals. And by that, what I mean is, and I'm not being disrespectful, but it's stimulus response. They get, they get stressed out, so that's the stimulus, and then they just go and get high. Humans do stimulus cognition response. So something happens, and then hopefully we think about it and say, hey, what should I do? Should I do something adaptive or maladaptive?
Right.
What's the best thing I can do, in this situation? And not doing drugs is it would be a real good choice, but
right. Well, this is, and and I'm sure you're familiar. Basically, when you've trained, we're talking here not like the reward centers in your brain are primed to like drive that behavior where you do the drug or whatever the behavior, if it's like shoplifting or shopping or whatever, it comes in many forms. And I think that's the difficult part, especially when this is what you've been doing for years and years, to all of a sudden, like, logic yourself out of that.
Yeah, it's the synapses. So when you're into the drugs, you go from the stress to the drug, and you have these synapses, these pathways in your brain. I mean, it's just like, walking through a lawn and just getting rid of the grass. There's just a pathway there. Well, what you need to do, and the brain is resilient. The brain grows new branches and synapses, and what you need to do is you need to create new pathways. So if you're addicted, there are ways to do this. And what they use is cognitive behavioral therapy, and they do two things. I mean, it's like the treatment du jour. You instruct the individual to stop doing the drug, show them ways to do that, and then also cognitively, you let them know that by doing the drug, it's not going to be the panacea that they think it is. By doing the drug, it's not a good thing. It's just going to complicate their lives and compound their issues. So, you work on both themes at the same time, the cognitive behavioral. And, I worked with clients that were dually diagnosed. They were, or individuals with co-occurring disorders. So they might have schizophrenia and addiction. And the plan is to deal with both things at the same time. And the other thing is view the substance, say alcohol, and the mental illness, view both of those as primary and chronic. And don't be saying that drugs cause the mental illness or the mental illness caused the drugs. I mean, they may dance around together, they may exacerbate each other, but they're both primary issues. And, I think, I know so many people that would rather say, well, I'm addicted than I'm mentally ill, because there's less of an stigma to be a drug addict than to be mentally ill. So, but
right, and if you've been self-medicating with these drugs, whatever they were, I imagine it's easier to do that than to take the meds. Let's say in the case of a schizophrenic, like the prescription, the ones that you are supposed to take, to make you address what's really wrong. Let's say with your brain in this case or whatever, versus like if you've been medicating with whatever it is that you've come across, that's difficult. As far as, and
one other thing too, just for the good of the order, I'm a baby boomer. We're the people born between 1946 to 1964.
Yeah,
our people, we were the ones who were abused LSD and mescaline and psilocybin and all that stuff, and that's why they got scheduled. It's unfortunate because those drugs we could have experimented with those, and just like, for example, ketamine is the go-to drug for depression. Ketamine works almost instantaneously, as opposed to, say, Prozac and those SSRIs that take like 1, 2, 3 weeks to kick in.
Yeah.
So ketamine, that had been abused by the kids, in that K-hole, all the raves and the clubs, a lot of these drugs could have been used for experiments, for the good of the order,
for people who really needed it, not like, because I want to party. How's that?
Yeah. I'm raising my hand because I was one of those too. I mean, my drugs of choice were hallucinogens, and and I kind of liked them, and but at least I never did the the heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, all that. But I'm just saying again, I'm not. This isn't a pro drug thing. I'm just saying that that was my experience. My experience, it was a good one. I don't think there was any harmful effects. I think and but I'm not being a hypocrite with people. When I do my anti-drug rant because
right. You've been there. You've seen the both sides of the coin. It's you know what, people, like I said, unless you've been, I mean, I was very young, so, but as I was, you hear about, like you said, in the 60s, and all this, and into the 70s was when I even heard, about people that did LSD, and then later on, even if they weren't doing it, they would have a trip. They would be tripping out. And basically that it damaged your brain. I was like, man, you got to be crazy to be doing this stuff,
Yeah.
And, and then you wonder, how did this ever, take off? And here we are now, we're being overrun like, with a fentanyl and then with the other different types of drugs and things like that.
It's horrible. It's horrible. And the fentanyl's been around for a long time.
Yes.
And, China's sending it over here and it goes to Mexico. And it's really, really difficult to stop that. And, I mean, don't blame any one political party for it because it's been around for a long,
drugs have been coming over in some form or other for a while.
A long time. And,
I want to say that besides the actual, it's just that people don't, people do realize, what am I saying? That some of these things that are cooked, they will kill you just from the get-go because of the way they were put together. If you're just lucky enough that you get the wrong batch, it'll kill you.
The reason for some of these toxic mixes out there, some of these heroin addicts, they don't get high anymore. So they go through withdrawal. So they use the drug more as a medication just to help them go through that, really bad withdrawal where all the euphoric feeling is reversed.
Right.
And they don't get high anymore. So here's this new batch of dope that's on the streets. And a lot of these old timers, they want it, and they're not thinking they're going to die. They're thinking they're going to get high.
Yes.
And they haven't gotten high in a long, long time. So they're chasing that high, that bell ringer. They want that. They want to experience that again. And some of them do. Some of them do, but some of them shoot up and overdose and die. But it drives sales because people know that there's some good stuff out there. The drug community talks to each other, and they know there's some good stuff out there, and so they go looking for it. And it's inexpensive. It's inexpensive.
Exactly. Whereas before, certain drugs were, like let's say in the 80s, cocaine. It wasn't a cheap drug if you were hooked on it. Whereas all of these, these last few years, it's very inexpensive from the crack to all this other stuff.
Yeah. Yes, I think they say a 6-pack of beer is more expensive than like a couple of stamps of heroin.
Yeah, so. I think probably regular cigarettes are too, with all the tariffs and stuff that they got on them. So, yeah. No, it's a deep dark hole. But I'm gonna get back to something that I think was from that book that you were talking about, the Hoodoo book. Okay.
Oh, Coleridge Hoodoo. Yeah, that came out last year.
Yes.
And Coleridge and Hoodoo is published by Beyond the Fray. They're a paranormal house from San Diego, and they did a really good job with it. I love that book. It's called Coleridge and Hoodoo: Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit.
But let me ask you, because where you're, like what you said was your hometown, is that considered like an Appalachian coal mining area, or what?
Well, not Appalachian. I mean, when you think of Appalachian, you think about these hillbillies and, a lot of poverty and that. No, my area, northeastern Pennsylvania, by Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, there was a lot of coal mining there, and that was the anthracite coal. So there were, anthracite fueled the Industrial Revolution. I mean, they had mines all over the place. But the sad thing is that the Pennsylvania miners were like indentured servants. I mean, They worked hard, they got black lung, and they just had a horrible life. And we had this thing called breaker boys. They were little boys that they sent down into the mines to either take care of the mules or to pick slag out of the breakers and all that. And there's one case of one kid was 5 years old, and his father died, and he was the main breadwinner. So in order for them to keep their company home, the kid was sent down into the mines, and he was walking the mule there. But 5 freaking years old.
My God, that's incredible. Because that was the thing. These mining companies did everything. They gave you housing, so as long as you worked there, though, that's the kind of deal, right?
Yeah, and then you never paid the vig. You never got out of it. Because,
sure.
I mean, you always owed the man because what you bought at the company store.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Didn't they also, like, you had to shop at the company store kind of deal? Like, you couldn't get away from it no matter what.
I know. It's like Hotel California, you could never leave.
As a matter of fact, there's a dispute going on right now with the lyrics of Hotel California, but that's another show. Yeah.
I know. I just saw that. Yeah, they're ripping off Don Henley and everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about that. It was written on a napkin or paper or something, and it's like, huh? I was like, man, that's an old song. And it's like, yep, it's going to court now. Yeah. So let's see what happens with that.
Yeah, I just read that the other day. Yeah. Yeah, that was one of I think the third highest selling album of all time, I think.
I think everybody, you hear the intro to Hotel California, everybody knows what it is.
I was listening years ago. I was listening to a CD, and it was a live concert, and they were playing that, and they started off with that. And man, I wanted to cry. I mean, those opening guitar chords were just they tug at your heart. They're really pretty good. So
yeah. No, it's that when I read that, I was like, after so many years, I would have thought something like this would have come up long time ago, but then you never know. So let me ask you with the because one time I was up in that area, in that area of Pennsylvania, and I can't remember, it was a little town, but I imagine it had to be in that area of Pennsylvania where you could see like it was a lot of like mining towns, if you want to call them that. And you look at them, and almost like this whole town, everything existed around the mining. This was the mainstay of the economy of these towns. And in a way, I mean, I'm beyond the what you were talking about, the mining thing. So when you talk about the hoodoo, was this belief systems that the people that moved into the area brought with them? Or was this something that developed because of the culture of working in the mines?
Well, hoodoo could be either a blessing or a curse.
Okay.
We talk about voodoo, down in New Orleans and Louisiana, but I talk about the hoodoo. Hoodoo could be is an offshoot of that. It could be a religion or not, but it could be either a blessing or a curse. And for a lot of the miners, I mean, like it was a curse to live there and work there. The communities were called patch towns. And even today, you could go to northeastern Pennsylvania and drive around, and it's really pretty cool because it's like driving back into the past to see some of these towns that are still like they were, And we also have a place in where I live in Columbia County called Centralia. Mm-hmm. And around 1962, they set a fire in this coal mine. They're just burning garbage, and it caught fire. And to this day,
God, yes,
it's Centralia, and they did Silent Hill.
Yes,
based on Centralia. Yeah, based on Centralia. So it's real close to where I live, but you should see this thing. So what happened?
Basically, didn't everybody have to move out of there? Didn't it kind of empty the town?
Exactly. Yeah, there's maybe right now 5 families that live there, and once they die off, that's going to be it. They won't be allowed to be there. But I used to drive through there, and they would have steam coming up from the road would buckle, and they had a thing called graffiti highway, and all these kids would go and spray paint like penises and all kinds of crazy stuff, peace signs, and all this thing. It was like maybe like a half mile or a mile long. It's called Graffiti Highway. It was like the third biggest tourist attraction in Pennsylvania. I mean, all these college kids would make a mecca to go there, the Graffiti Highway. And this is in my book. I have a chapter in Co-Region Hoodoo about Centralia, but they bulldozed that. They covered it up. But what happened was there was a Catholic priest who was speaking out against the Molly Maguires, and they were
Okay.
rabble rousers, and they beat him up, and so he put a curse on the town of Centralia. He said at the end,
Really?
the only thing left standing will be St. Ignatius Church, and even that's gone. But he put a curse on the town, and like I said, they call it the Devil's Fire. It started around 1962, and it's still burning. It's still,
I mean, let me ask you: did they do anything for these families? Because I can imagine your real estate. If you live there, that's it. Who's going to want to buy your house?
Yeah, they did two things. One, they did eminent domain. They just took over a lot of these properties, and they bought people out. Now you had to go and sign on the line, but they would buy you out, and then they relocated a lot of these people to other communities that they created. So they were close to Centralia, but out of the way. But Centralia is a pretty interesting thing. They have a Ukrainian church there, a Russian Orthodox church that's there, and they still have mass but pretty amazing. But I used to go there, frequently and just go and take pictures and just hang out. But it was kind of a neat thing. So
no, that's I remember reading about that, and I was like, oh my God. Can you imagine? It's like, okay, you cannot live there. And I imagine, if this is your home and this is where you grew up and this is I'd be like upset. But eventually you've got no choice but to like leave. You can't stay there. And I had read somewhere something about the Silent Hill being like kind of like modeled on that. And that's a pretty disturbing movie.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's very, very like.
The thing, too, about Pennsylvania coal miners, for as bad as they had it worse in West Virginia. I mean, they had to go and put more coal into their buggies and everything else. And that's why Mother Jones went down there to organize. I mean, she was like a feisty little babe, that went there, and she was helping to organize these coal miners. And so it was a hard life. But my book, Sheppton, The Myth, Miracle, and Music, talks about that coal mining and the Sheppton disaster, and the fact that, and this is, very few people know this, but the Chilean copper mine disaster of 2010, they had a movie called The 33.
Yes.
Those 33 guys were rescued by Sheppton technology that they developed in 1963, yeah. And the other thing, too, talk about cannibalism in Sheppton, in Chile, they wrote, there was a movie, The 33, and then there were several books written about that. But they had rations for those 33 guys. So every day they would get a little thimble of milk, a little bit of tuna fish, and a couple of crackers. And that was what they would have for all day. And they had water, too. But so they knew that at a certain point, the food rations were going to give out.
Okay.
And, again, they documented this. They said if that happens, we might have to go and cannibalize somebody. And this is like the, I guess, the black humor, the gallows humor. But all of those guys were Chilean, except for the one dude. He was from Ecuador.
Oh, boy.
And so the thought was, the guy from Ecuador is going to get it. So.
Yeah, exactly. You're outnumbered. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, the original Sheppton incident, what happened? Was there an explosion? How was it that they ended up trapped?
Yeah, it was called they were pillar robbers. And what they would do is they would go, this was an independent mine.
Okay.
And after the mining companies would get out of there, when they thought there wasn't any profit left, after the mine was tapped out pretty much, they would leave. And then I guess these independent miners would lease them. I don't know how they worked it. I think they leased them, or else they just went down there and took it. I'm pretty sure there was something legitimate about it. But anyway, they would go in the back, and they had these pillars of rich coal holding up the mine. So they would start in the back and maybe use timbers and everything, but they would take out these rich, the pillars.
Okay.
And then do the next one and the next one. Well, what happened in Sheppton was they were pillar robbing, and it was on a Tuesday. They sent down the buggy, they filled it up, they sent it to the top, and this guy George Walker, he was the foreman up there, so he dumped it and sent it back down, and on the way back down, that's when everything just exploded, just like it collapsed, and it was like like Hiroshima, like all these tons of rock and coal went down. And then they had the rushes, and it kept on, every now and then it would be like another quake. and so the configuration of the mind kept on changing. But
wow.
the thing about Sheppton, it was an international story for 2 weeks. There were reporters there from Germany, the UK, from Japan, watching this thing. They had military people watching, to see to see how they could survive under there. I mean, just like there was thousands of people, National Guard, military, Salvation Army, the paparazzi, the rubberneckers, the spectators. I mean,
Sure.
It was a circus. It was a circus. And the Sheppton mine disaster of August of 1963 was one of the top stories of Associated Press until it was surpassed in November by the assassination of President John Kennedy.
Wow.
63. So that was pretty bizarre thing. What happened too after they finally extricated the two miners, and then never found the third one, but they went to the Hazleton General Hospital, and one by one they took the younger guy, this Throne, and they flew him over in a chopper, and then they sent over Davy Fallon. He was 58, so it was like a symbiotic relationship. The older guy, the younger guy, and the older guy pretty much helped the younger guy keep his act together. But anyway, they go over to the hospital. Now, the Felon, the older gentleman, was a devout Catholic. Throne was just a drunkard, womanizer, just, didn't have any religion at all. He's probably atheist.
Okay.
But they went there to the hospital, and there's a picture of Pope John the 23rd. Now, Throne probably wasn't steeped in Roman Catholicism, didn't know that, but he goes to Davy. Davy, look, that's the guy, that's the stranger. That's who we saw down there.
Wow.
I know, that was just like amazing.
Yes.
And there was a bit of a religious convergence because Throne helped form a non-denominational church there in Hazleton, and he stopped his drinking, and he mended his ways. So it was pretty
Oh my God,
amazing.
That's a great story right there.
Yeah. And one other thing, too, there was a guy named Ed Conrad. He was a gonzo journalist like Hunter S. Thompson and some of these guys. Ed Conrad took those miners down to Bridgewater, Virginia, to meet Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she wrote that book on death and dying, how we have anger and we negotiate.
Right, the steps of grieving and all that stuff, yes.
Yeah. And she said that what happened there was an example of life after death, meaning the Pope John the 23rd. And they also took him to meet Dr. Bruce Grayson. And Bruce Grayson, I don't know if you've interviewed him, but he's like a scholar on near-death experiences. And he was saying that what happened there at Sheppton was profound. So
how long were they down there, Max? How long were
they were down there for 2 weeks, and they finally were able to go and find them, do a borehole. Howard Hughes, the billionaire, send up some tungsten carbide bits, some drill bits from Houston that they used to bring them out. And but they were down there 330 feet. And it was precarious to find them, and then also to do the drilling so that they wouldn't go and have the mine collapse on them. So that part was dicey too. And Davy Fallon, the older guy, when he was rescued, he mouthed off. He said that the rescue team should have had them out quicker, and he became the pariah for a while because he was just mouthing off. And you don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah,
but, so
you could tell he was a little bit stressed out. What can I say? I'm thinking about it. I'm not claustrophobic, but I'm feeling the claustrophobia. Just I'm listening to you, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. And I have a chapter called Extrication, when they plucked them out of the hole, and there was this borehole. They sent down parachute harnesses, so they had them wrap themselves in these harnesses. They had axle grease, helmets, and so they put their hands over their heads, and they drug them up, and it was tight. It was a real tight fit. And I wrote about this in claustrophobic terms. I mean, like that was one of the parts of the Sheppton book that I was the most proud of. I wanted to make this like sort of horrific and
Yeah, that would do it for me. And
Yeah.
the reason why I asked you about the culture, the hoodoo, is like down in Peru, they have miners, okay? And they put a figure they call Theo, which is like the devil. It's like, they make it like the prototypical, with the horns and everything. And they put them smoking a cigar, and this is usually at the entrance or into the interior dark of the mine, and with jugs of alcohol. And, a lot of Peruvians, they're Catholic or Christian or whatever. So everybody asks. Yeah. And for them, they say that when you're going into the bowels of the earth to mine, the only one that would know how to, it's almost like one of those things where you ask for help, but you fear it at the same time. The only one that's going to help you is the devil. And it's a really weird logic as to why they choose that versus, something religious. And they even get to the point where they even sacrifice llamas. I think it's like once a year, and then they have that figure that they kind of make. Some of them are life size almost, and that's their justification. If you're going to be in the bowels in a mine, this is who you're going to ask for, like, to get you out of a predicament. And I was like, okay, why not?
That's bizarre.
Yes,
bizarre.
Yes, it's very weird as far as that. Sometimes beliefs take this like little like left turn, kind of like on the belief thing. Like if you're like trapped in a mine, who are you going to ask for help? But
the Mexicans, they go to on Day of the Dead. They go and they bring their departed ones, like their favorite cigars or their alcohol or their tacos or whatever. I mean, they believe this is a day when the dead can communicate. When the living can communicate with the dead. So that's a real rich tradition in history.
Right, because there's the Day of the Innocents, and then there's, which really goes back to, the Catholic, All Hallows or Samhain or Halloween, whatever you want to call it. Then November 1st and November 2nd. November 1st was the Day of the Martyrs, and November 2nd was basically that you prayed for the souls in purgatory. And, that kind of, how it kind of like goes into something different. And in some cases, especially with the Day of the Dead, that, like you said, that they go and they decorate the tombs or the remembrance, or they even bring even portraits, everything. And the Day of the Innocents is for children. But there's an aspect also where there's a fear, like, especially if you want to look at it as like a kind of version of ancestor worship, where besides, let's say, the tomb of your family, you also put stuff out for spirits that don't have any family or anyone to pray for them or give them offerings, because those are the ones that can make trouble for you. So sometimes it's besides remembrance of the family. And I'm not Mexican, by the way. I'm Hispanic, but I'm not Mexican. But part of it is that, which kind of is part of the purgatory, the souls in purgatory thing, of the souls that are out there that need somebody to remember and pray for them. And, that thing that you always think your family's going to look out for you even after you die, kind of deal. So that's just an amazing thing. I had a chance to meet Ed and Lorraine Warren. Oh my God! Lucky you.
The Roman Catholic demonologist from Connecticut.
Yes.
And this was in 1988. And this is, and again, I'm like mouthing off about my book, Whole Region Hoodoo, but it's in there. I have actual pictures that I took of Ed and Lorraine. But here's what happened. In 1988, they came to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, which is this lovely little touristy place. I mean, it's like a fairy tale place with all kinds of mansions and railroads and everything. But they were on a 15-city book tour. Back home, there was a thing called the Schmerl Haunting.
Oh, yes. I've heard of that.
And it was our version of Amityville Horror. They heard grunting sounds. There were smells. There was profanity etched into the mirrors. And Jack Schmerl claimed that he was raped by a female demon, a succubus.
Yeah, but weren't they, and what's really funny is, weren't they a very religious family?
They were Roman Catholic. So the Catholic Church start sending in all these priests to sit there to do an exorcism, and nothing's working. So Ed and Lorraine Warren came there, and Ed and Lorraine co-wrote the book, The Haunted, which was one of this family's ordeal. So they were, let's see, Jack and Janet Schmerl, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and Robert Curran. He was a reporter, and the five of them co-wrote that book. But anyway, so Ed and Lorraine Warren were in Jim Thorpe. I had a chance to hang out with them, take pictures, and I kept in touch with them over the years. And I would call them up and ask them questions about the Schmerl haunting and demonology. And Ed told me that he would go and do battle with these demons, and he would go, in the name of Saint Michael the Archangel, I command thee to show thyself. And then Ed Warren would go and invoke the spirit of Jesus Christ, of Saint Michael the Archangel, and Padre Pio.
Yes.
And he would go and try to use the holy water and the crucifix. A couple things. There's a Russian Orthodox priest that's an exorcist real close to where I live. And he was saying that the power of Satan is great, but the power of the Lord is even greater. And another one with Padre Pio, there's a place in Bartow, Barto, Pennsylvania. It's outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. And Padre Pio has this museum, church, monastery. It's just like really elaborate. It's just great. But there was a you couldn't take pictures, but there was a quote from him, and he said, even though the power of Satan is horrific, he goes, I go to the Blessed Mother for my strength. And I said, my one, I'm a former practicing Catholic, but I went to my neighbor who's a very devout Catholic. I said, well, why the Blessed Mother? Why not Jesus or God the Father? And she said, because Mary's the gatekeeper. So I know that a lot of Protestants don't buy into that, but there's many roads, and there's it's a Holy Trinity, and I think Mary's there too. But I couldn't believe when I read that quote from Padre Pio, that to ascribe such love and devotion and power, or authority to the Blessed Mother. So, just amazing.
You can't see it, but I've got this huge. I've got a huge picture right over me of the Virgin's face from a Botticelli painting called the Magnificat. Yeah. It's a much larger painting, but all I have is just her face. So, and when I went to school in high school, I was taught by the Marian sisters and the Marist brothers. So I had a good dose of the power of the Virgin Mary kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I got a picture of Padre Pio that's framed. It's right here in my. I'm in my office space right now. There he is. But Padre Pio, for the people that for your listeners aren't familiar, Padre Pio, he was sainted, and he suffered from stigmata, and he bled like the wounds of Christ. So what they did, the priest and the brothers, they wrapped his wounds with gauze, and they watched him for like maybe 6 or 7 days, and then they took that gauze off, and they were looking for signs of scarring, signs that a human, that he was recovering from these wounds, and they were still fresh, and he was still bleeding. He bled. He had the stigmata all of his life. So,
right. Exactly.
So that was one thing with Padre Pio. But another thing too, and when we talk about Bigfoot, and this is about Padre Pio, but with Bigfoot they use a term called bilocation.
Yes.
Where the reason that you can't see Bigfoot is because he's in front of you and then he's behind you. He's almost like two places at one time. But with Padre Pio, listen to this. Padre Pio had his own version of bilocation. He was at an opera, and he was with a whole bunch of other people, an entourage of brothers and priests, and he had his head back, and it was like sleeping or in a trance. But they saw him, that he was there physically. At the same time, Padre Pio was at another event seen by priests and brothers, and he's walking and talking in two places at the same time. Call that what you will, but that's
exactly.
Like mystical. That's it's the supernatural. It's something that science can explain. So, if any of your listeners are into any, with Co-Regent Hoodoo, I try to go and take the spiritual and the paranormal and bring it a little bit closer to the scientific. And
Yes.
in Coleridge and Hoodoo, I have chapters on Pope John the 23rd, on Saint Teresa of Avila, who was the 14th century Spanish mystic, and man,
Yes.
is she a beautiful human being. God, I love Sister Teresa. And
Well,
there's
no,
also a little
and it's
bit
really
about,
funny because if thankfully they looked at her visions as something related to God, because in another place of time it could have been the other way around. You know that, right? As far as
that they would have thought that she was possessed by the devil.
Yes,
and
yes.
Burned her at the stake. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and they had a couple of nuns that had stuff like that, and never, of course, nothing like Saint Teresa of Avila, but that they had very, how can I say, unusual visions that you think, of course this happened hundreds of years ago, that you're like, was this really mystical, or was this a person with some type of mental illness? So it's like,
yeah. Well, even with exorcists, the priest will go and determine whether or not the person is either mentally ill, like
Yes.
schizophrenia or Tourette's, or if they're actually possessed by a demon. And
Yes.
that's that's what they have to do. In the case of the Schmerl haunting, they brought in this guy, Father Trebo, from New York State, and he did, I think it was 3 exorcisms before he finally was able to go and cleanse the house.
did they ever explain what the origin was of how they got this going on with them? I mean,
Lorraine warranted that there were a number of spirits, and a couple of them were just malevolent, and they were very, very evil.
Okay.
And I think there was an old woman, and I forget. It's in my Coleridge and Hoodoo book, but I forget exactly what they said. But the other thing, I wanted to say, with Pope John the 23rd was canonized in 2014, and Pope Francis had a dual ceremony. So there were 2 guys that were canonized. The other one was Pope John Paul II. And for your listeners out there, his claim to fame was that he organized a school for exorcism. It was a school for to teach priests the medieval art of
the Latin rites.
Right. And because he felt that evil exists, the devil exists, and we need to go back there to go give ourselves this kind of protection. So there were priests from, I think, 132 different countries that were attending this and learning. So that was pretty amazing. But I do a thing called Roman Catholic mysticism, and I talk about all the things I've just been talking about. But I've been invited to go and be the guest speaker for the Knights of Columbus.
Okay.
And they're going to have a whole bunch of knights there, and my book was the book of the month for this Catholic group back home.
Really?
And they had 2 priests there. So as I'm talking about exorcists and all this, the one priest, they sort of vetted me. He agreed with everything I said, but he said that his diocese has an exorcist, but he can't let me know who it is.
Right. Yes, I know that some of them they keep their identity, like their secret identity as the exorcist.
Yeah, because I think if you knew that I was an exorcist, I think a whole lot. If people knew that I was when I'm not, they would just start coming to me for whatever. So. Right.
Yeah. No, and I hate to say it, there's a lot of people that are mentally ill that think that they're possessed, but they'll tell you, if your problem is a mental illness, you can't levitate, you can't speak languages you don't know, have knowledge of things that supposedly people that are possessed would know. But besides the fact they always have a psychiatrist, look at these people just to make sure before they ever go forward with an exorcism. And but yeah, what was it? I could see where that would be a problem if you knew that the the priest that you had at your parish was the exorcist for the diocese. It'd be like, huh?
Yeah. Saint Teresa of Avila, it's documentation, numerous documented cases where she actually levitated, where the nuns had to hold her down. And Saint Teresa of Avila, and this is connected with the Sheppton thing, she said that through prayer and meditation, we could reach states of ecstasy and rapture and flight of the soul. And flight of the soul is an out-of-body experience that was experienced by Felon and Throne numerous times. They went out of the pit and they looked down and they could see the rescue team and all the other stuff. I mean, they were up there looking down.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they did. 2 different occasions, yeah. So.
Wow. Let me tell. Yeah. Were they in? Well, no, of course they were, Marlene. I'm thinking, did they have any light down there where they were at, or were they in pitch darkness? Do you know?
No, they had like the lights that they had.
Okay.
It eventually went out, and it was just pitch black. They're crawling around on their hands and knees like dogs. They're getting cut up. They're sucking in coal particles and dust. I mean, it was horrible. And the worst thing was, and down there, 330 feet down there, it was like a constant, like maybe 54 degrees. You know, so and there's water, there's sulfur water that was there. There was nothing to eat. I mean, I don't believe the stories of cannibalism. I think that when the mine collapsed, that Felon and Throne were on one side, and the other guy, this Louis Bova, was on the other side. And I believe that they were separated by a mountain of coal and rock. So I don't believe that, even though people come up to me when I do these presentations, in northeastern Pennsylvania, people always have a theory about what happened. They always had a theory. And
you always think, when you're hungry, and you hear about these trips of these back in the 19th century that went up to the Arctic, that they were trying to find a passage over, and some of these ships, and they resorted to cannibalism. But it took a long time before they got there, And were they giving them food, or were they spending these whole 2 weeks without any food?
No, what happened, they were down there for 2 weeks, entombed.
Okay.
But after the 6th day, they drilled down. They were able to find them.
Okay.
And then they started to make that hole a little bit bigger, and they were able to send them down things like salve and medication for the hands because they were all cut up.
Okay.
Food, soup, all that stuff. But the thing of it is, I mean, the hardest thing. Well, while they're down there, they saw Pope John the 23rd. He was there for 2 weeks, standing there in the corner.
And that's why I'm asking you that thing about the light. I was like, did this apparition have its own luminescence? That's what I'm thinking about. Or were they here in pitch dark, and all of a sudden they see this figure?
He must have somehow lit up. There must have been some kind of he might have been emitting some kind of light. But they saw stairwells, gold, leading to heaven. They saw, and they saw ancestors, family and ancestors. And,
really?
And even though there were people there that they believed were their ancestors, but they've never saw them before. But here's the thing: I knew this guy, this business person, who's like an accountant. And he was the person that worked with Davy Felon, and he let me interview him, but I couldn't use his name. He was going to stay anonymous. But he asked Davy Felon. He goes, "Well, Davy, what about this cannibalism?" And Davy said, "No, that's not true. That never happened." "And what about these stories?" He goes, "Yeah, I saw my family, my ancestors. They're sitting on all those steps, and they saw doors going into the sides. Just." A lot of really bizarre things. I mean, just
let me tell you something
amazing. And Davy Felon, who was very, very straightforward, he said that there's a lot, and he never went looking for publicity. I mean, the paparazzi just kept on asking him, and then what happened was, before they went up there, Davy Felon told Throne, the younger guy, "Keep your mouth shut. Don't tell them what we saw down here. They'll think we're crazy." And as soon as Throne went up there, very impetuous, they had the paparazzi. And they're saying, "Well, what was it like down there? And how did you think you'd never ever get out? And what kept you going?" And all this other stuff. And all of a sudden, Throne started to talk and tell about seeing, the stranger that was Pope John the 23rd, and the stairways, leading to heaven.
Did Pope John ever say, or telepathically communicate with them in some way?
No, but here's the thing. When you talk about the MO, the modus operandi, in all 3 cases of his purported, his alleged miracles. The other two were medical miracles, and what happened was the nun, and there was another person that he stood in the corner with his arms folded, and he gave them a sign of peace, gave them a sign with the Sheppton miners that they were going to be rescued, but gave these other people a sign that they were going to get better, they were going to get well. The one nun had horrible stomach condition, and the doctors, when they checked her out, she was completely cured, and they called it a medical miracle. There was no other way to explain, this horrible, damaged flesh that she had, prior to the miracle. So they called it a medical miracle. And one thing about Pope John the 23rd that people don't know, during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, he was the one. Pope John the 23rd always said that we should have an audience with the Marxists, the communists, have an open dialogue. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 62, he was able to talk to President Kennedy, who was a Catholic, Fidel Castro, and Khrushchev. And he did some things behind the scenes to get that the temperature, to lower the temperature.
Yes.
And eventually the Soviets took their missiles out of there and never put them there. And I don't know what the trade-off was. I don't know exactly what they gave Khrushchev to save face, but I'm sure that there was some kind of a
right. Yeah,
bargain.
there's always some type of face saving involved and stuff like that.
Yeah. So Pope John the 23rd, though, was involved in that, and just amazing guy. And he was the one that brought in Vatican II, which liberalized the church, and people either viewed him as a saint for doing that and being progressive, or as the devil himself for doing this. There's still Catholic priests and churches that refuse to go along with Vatican II.
Right. Now, I remember with my school, the nuns, when I started, they had the full habit. They were dressed in white because down in Florida, in South Florida, it was hot. But they were, the only thing they had was their face was out. And I remember like a few years later, I was still in grade school, then they allowed them to wear the habit was to the knees, and, they didn't have the whole big giant habit, at the top. It was, and that was because of that change of what you're talking about, that they... Yeah, I remember
Pope John XXIII and Vatican II. Yeah, he wanted to reform the church. I wanted to say this. I don't know how much time we have.
No, go ahead.
For some of your listeners on the Gulf side of Florida, I'm going to be at the Crystal River Library on Tuesday, March the 26th.
Okay.
It'll be from 1 to 3, and that's in Crystal River, Florida, the library. And I'm going to be talking about Flying Saucer Esoteric, the altered states of ufology. So I'm doing a presentation, and we've been contacting a number of paranormal groups in the area, especially Ocala. So we think we're going to have a nice representation there. And so, I'm hoping that some of your listeners may be able to go and attend and, and just say hello. I'd love to go and
absolutely. Absolutely. If anything, Max, for the podcast listeners, because I'll have a link to your website in the credits of the show, but what is your website address?
Yeah, it's www.maximfurek.com.
Okay.
So www.maximfurek.com.
So you post all these events that you're going to be attending on your website, right?
I'm going to be posting that one, yes. I'll do that tonight.
Because, sometimes people, when they're listening, they can't, they're driving or doing something else. So this is a way always that they could go and get the information that they need. And I used to have family in Crystal River till very recently. They moved out in the 70s, and then some of them just died and others just moved away. And as a matter of fact, we sold a big property we had out there like last year or a couple of years ago.
So you were from Crystal River?
Well, I wasn't. I had family that moved out there from Miami in the 70s. And this was, it was really funny because there was a joke. It was like Crystal River, there was like one stop sign. I mean, one traffic light. And if you blew past that was Crystal River back there. And we had a great, well, he was my grand uncle. he lived to be 105 years old, but his birthday happened to always fall very close to Labor Day. So the whole family would go out there every year thinking, this is going to be the year, we better go and see him. And he lived to be 105. So that's why,
Wow.
we're very, we had family out there, but
And you
everybody.
probably have some good genetics.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really funny because every year they would send out a newspaper reporter to ask him, what's your secret for your long life? And all he would tell them is, I eat 3 square meals a day. It's all right, so much for the secret to longevity. But that kind of deal.
I don't, they talk about these blue zones. That's where people live to be over 100. And there's like all these blue zones in the world. There's one in Costa Rica. There's one off the coast of California. There's one in, I think, Italy, Japan. And a friend of mine from the coal region. Now, you would not expect the coal region, the gritty, dirty, coal mining thing to be a blue zone. But she's talking about her relatives that live to be over 100, and she's writing this book about that and the blue zone in the coal region. And that just blew my mind. I mean, but all the variables that allow people to live long. You have a group of people to surround you, that care about you.
Yes.
You eat relatively clean. You maybe walk and exercise a lot. You're not sedentary. So it's all the stuff that maybe we did back in the
I heard that, and I want to say that this town, again, I might be just making up. I want to say it was Pennsylvania or in that area. Same thing. They did a study where there was a doctor that he said that when people got older, they didn't have all the, he says, once I had I guess when people, it was a smaller town, when you know all your patients and the families and that kind of deal. And he found that if they developed any type of heart problems or anything like that, it was way later in old age. And same thing, longevity, good health. And they were looking at what is, these people, they weren't all related. What was it? And believe it or not, they found that they had a bunch of civic activities in the town. And that thing where people were actually, like what you said, that they were like milling around and interacting and they had friends and they had things to do, that promoted part of the longevity, because throughout your life, basically for the people that stayed there, there wasn't this thing where you stayed at home as you grew older and people forgot about you. There was a bunch of civic groups.
The most precious, the most valuable thing that humans have or can have is connection to other people. And when you are, and we talked about this tonight, but when you're mentally ill or addicted or filled with shame caused by childhood trauma or whatever, you lose that. You don't feel that you're worthy of that human connection. And that's what shame and trauma does and all the other things. So the fact that these people are connected and they feel that they're contributing to a group, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, it's just, getting out of our egocentric self and connecting with a greater good. That's like,
let's face it. If you're going to sit home and I know I'm going to, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Even if you do have reason to feel sorry for yourself, it's better to go out there and do something, so that you don't sit there and ponder why the universe is picking on you, kind of deal. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I don't know.
Some people, sometimes they fall into that rut and then they do, like you said, they isolate and, they don't go out. And I hate to say it, but the phones, the cellular phones, and sometimes the computers and everything, people sometimes tend to let go of the person-to-person, face-to-face kind of activity. And that's like, don't do that. No, don't do that.
Well, they're saying that a lot of young people, they're connected with the technology. They're techies, but they're not connected one-on-one, face-to-face.
Oh, no.
In person. So, it's almost like a trade-off. But, I remember back in the day when, it was almost like church. We would listen to these albums, record albums, vinyl, and you'd play one side, and then you'd flip it over and play the other side. It was like a ritual, and the music was the sacrament. And so
right.
Tell
Tell people, what's over the The really good albums were the ones that had a lot of good songs, but sometimes you had a couple of good songs, and the rest of the songs on the album were like, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. And I remember the one guy was really progressive. He had a party, and he played Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd's. And we all listened to that collectively for the first time. And that was a wonderful experience because, it wasn't just me and the music, but it was me and a room full of other people, focused on the same thing, the same vibration. And let's face it, Dark Side of the Moon was just, I think it's still on the list of, the top selling albums of all time. It's been around for decades. So, but that was just so different. And whatever the Beatles did, and to make music an art form, Pink Floyd took it a little bit further, or a lot further.
Oh, let me tell you something. I went to see Ringo Starr and his all-star band last summer, and he brought in some great people. He brought some great people in to play with him. What a great concert! It was an open-air arena. It was fantastic. Yeah, and so some of those.
When I saw him back home, he had Todd Rundgren, who stole the show.
Yeah.
Todd Rundgren is this little piss pot that jumps up and down and kicks his leg, but he's so good. And they had people from Santana, the guy from Mr. Toto.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, Ringo does a good job. And then he does all the rockabilly stuff, So,
but he brings in some interesting people. He brings in some really good musicians sometimes, and but I know what you're talking about as far as stealing the show. Yeah, but still, it's like, it's great. It was a very good concert. Yeah. That's.
And
Go ahead.
No, so I used to be a rock journalist, and one of my bigger things was I interviewed Hall & Oates, and I had to get.
Oh my God, I love Hall & Oates, and I know everybody must be going Marlene, but I love Hall & Oates.
No, they're good. I had to write a letter to Tommy Mottola, and he was married to Mariah Carey at the time, but they were the power couple, and so Tommy Mottola Productions, they were like the publicists for Hall & Oates. So I got permission. So I interviewed them in Boulder, Colorado, in a room reserved for just in case. So that was kind of cool, and that was one. And then I met these people that had a publication there, so I was writing for them. And then the other one was we went to Estes Park, where Stephen King wrote The Shining.
Yes, The Shining.
And Estes Park has the Stanley Hotel, and Stephen King called it the Overlook. But Stanley Hotel, according to the historian, I wrote an article about this, but he claimed that it was haunted by the ghost of Cora Stanley, and she was blind, and you could hear her tapping down the steps. So that was Cora. So. But that was
Let me tell you something. They benefited from that Stephen King novel, making that, because there's still people going out there, the tourism, because it's the Shining Hotel. Everybody thinks of it.
Yep. And they're ripping off all the brass room numbers.
Really?
That was the big thing.
Oh my God, that's.
Yeah. Yep. They wanted their souvenirs. Yeah. But Boulder was really good for my career. And nice time. It's almost like an in between L.A. and New York. Just pretty hip. So.
Yeah, but there's definitely, and it's, there's a lot of groups or performers that they had their heyday, and not because they died and they just faded away. And then there's others that have kept going and going and going, and 40 years later, 30 years later, they're still around. And
and with Hall & Oates, they tried to go and jazz up their act, so they were touring with Tears for Fears. Get a younger generation.
Right.
And Daryl Hall was always pissed off that he wasn't getting the recognition. The respect that he felt he deserved because his crime was that he had all these commercial hits, all these top 10 hits.
Right.
Well, so what? That's what he is. He's a gifted songwriter and musician, and he's successful. So some of the people, the Boo Birds, the elitist, avant-garde, musicologists and that, the rock aficionados, they sort of look down on Hall & Oates. But they're good. I've seen them in concert maybe 5 times. And
I saw them 3 years ago, and I'm waiting for them to come back. The ones I was kind of and I know this has nothing to do with the paranormal, but I'm still going to talk about it. I went to see the Doobie Brothers, their 50 year And I was very disappointed,
Yeah.
and I'm going to tell you why. They have so many great songs, and they paid like 3 of them, and then they were playing some of this unknown music, and I was like, what? You guys have such
Uh,
great songs. Why are you doing
yeah,
that?
yeah. The best one was Foreigner, and Lou Gramm, the lead singer, is no longer with them because they kicked him out because of his drug use. But whoever the new lead singer is, I mean, he's note for note perfect. But anyway,
Right.
they're playing their perfect night, perfect audience. It was an outdoor thing, and hit after hit after hit after hit. I mean, Foreigner must have like 15 top 20
Yes,
hits. I mean,
yeah.
they just
I'm going to be going to see
going
them.
through, going one after the other. And then, of course, when they do, I Want to Know What Love Is, they
Yes.
bring in the local choir to sing that. They always do that. So that's their sort of like their trademark. But yeah, they were good.
No, as a matter of fact, we went to see Men at Work. It was funny, one of those things.
Okay.
The only guy that's left from Men at Work is the original singer. Everybody else
Okay.
is young and, that kind of thing. And of course, his voice is, you hear it and you know it's him. And it was like, yeah, if it wasn't for you, forget it. But he's, when they get to the part when they're introducing the band members, and it's like, that you mean you're the only, it's not Men at Work, it's Man at Work. So yeah. So
good, yeah.
some of these. So anyway, guys, I'm gonna be back with you. I'm gonna because I'll sign back on in a minute, Max, to speak to some of my audience. But I'm gonna stop this recording so you and me can talk. Okay, hold on. I'm back. I was talking. Okay, I might be. I was talking to Max about maybe this is a big maybe putting in some type of paranormal conference later on over here down here in Florida. So I'll keep you guys posted if that happens. One thing is tentative talking, and then another thing is to produce it. But yes, I think that would be super interesting. And by the way, if you're a researcher, paranormal researcher, ufologist, Bigfoot, or anything, and then this is like hot. I mean, hot off the press. If you think you might be interested in participating, probably in that conference, if we get it together for the end of the year, of this year, contact me, Marlene at MiamiGhostChronicles.com, and just you'll say I might be available or I might be interested. Like I said, it's not a definite thing, something that's talk about just in the planning stages, but it would be good to maybe line up people that would be, would like to do a presentation. Because, hey, at the end of the day, and I've said it before, I mean, you could look at all these paranormal shows. And the truth is that, how's this? Partly they're produced for entertainment purposes. They have to squeeze, this information or whatever they're presenting X amount of time. Plus, they have to grab the audience's attention and keep it. I'm not saying let's have a boring conference, but if you really want to get to skinny, the real, what really goes on, whether it's paranormal, ghost hunting, UFOs, Bigfoot, whatever, cryptid, the ordinary people as normies that are out there doing this work or have been doing this work, this is really when you hear the good stories, the stories that you're not going to hear in any of the shows. Because after a while, I'm sure some people have noticed some of these shows, all of a sudden it's the repetition or some version of that certain location or this certain story of what happened there. And after a while, it's like, okay. But the really good, interesting stories is from people that are out in the field working on stuff like this. Whatever it is, whether, you get some people, like I said, that have been doing it for years. So they have a whole host of stories. In some cases, they've even been tracking, how often does this phenomena occur? Does it coincide with something else? Does weather play have anything to do with it? Is it a certain time of year? Is it more prevalent around this type of men, women, or children? Yeah. Anyway, if people out there that have been doing it for a while, the best stories, I've said, even historical places, the best stories come from docents or that have been there for a few years. Those are the ones that will tell you because they've been there early, before anybody arrives or afterwards. They got the best stories, and they'll tell you, yeah, I've seen and I've heard, or I make sure that when we close down, I'm not the last one out the door. I'm never left here alone, Why? Because at some point they had some experience, when like nobody else should be here, and they hear stuff or see stuff. Or in some cases, it's really funny because this happens a lot. The people that are regularly at these locations, they get their name called. Like whatever's there is intelligent enough to know their name. And that wakes them up. That's like, I'm out of here, bye. They just grab their stuff and they'll say, yeah, they'll come back and they'll say, I wasn't scared, but let's face it, it's a little bit disquieting to have your name called by thin air, for lack of a better word. So anyway, like I said, I'll keep you guys posted. And of course, there'll be a link to Max's website on the credits of the show. And like he said, March, he's going to have that presentation at the Crystal River Library. All right. And this is going to be March the 26th, I believe, at 2 p.m. But for verification purposes, go ahead and go to his website and check it out. As far as, he's got interesting books. Let me tell you something. He's got an interesting life. Here you go from rock and roll, interviewing rock and roll people, and somewhere in the mix, people with addiction problems, and then we're going here into the paranormal. I find that extremely interesting, and I really hope you like the show, and thank you for coming back every week and spending this time with me. And again, I want to repeat, MiamiGhostChronicles.com if you want to, or MP Pellicer. I've got links if you want to listen to the podcast versions without commercial interruptions. I've got a list of all the shows there that all you have to do is click and you can listen from the browser or just download the MP3 file. And so sign up for my Substack articles at mppellicer.com. Like I said, I've got articles, old shows, new podcast, interesting stuff, etc., etc., etc. So, till next time, take care.